But back in the day, we used to trek down a couple of times a year as a young finance journalist in a suit and tie to cover the AICC lunch. That's the Australia-Israel Chamber of Commerce. It's a big business lobby. This has long been the most glamorous of the big business lobbies in Australia. Typically, it involved lunch at the finest hotel in town, say the Western Ballroom, where they would host, say, 1,000 people for a 3-course lunch with wines. I'd get along with my notebook, chat to a few truly boring big business types while scoffing down the food and the grog, and scribble a few notes in shorthand when it came to the speech, the address. There was always a big person doing the address. The pulling power of the AICC is second to none. Top politicians, top business figures are regularly featured at every lunch for the keynote address. We're talking about chairmen, chairpeople, CEOs of top Australian companies, the top Australian companies, the banks, the miners, etc. Sometimes, from a journalist point of view, there'd be a story, sometimes not. We never really thought much about why we were there at a ritzy hotel at the Australia-Israel Chamber of Commerce. There was no Australia-Palestine Chamber of Commerce, of course, but there was no Australia-Italy or Japan Chambers of Commerce either. Just the AICC. The only big business lobby to rival the AICC is really the Business Council of Australia, which holds an annual gala dinner. You get the usual stuff there. Taxes are too high, wages are too high, we need flexibility. Flexibility is the word for lower wages and lower corporate taxes. The BCA is the trade union for CEOs in Australia. The only union, in fact, where the members, the CEOs of Australia's top 100 companies, don't actually pay their own union dues. The shareholders do. But that's a small point. They do disclose who funds them. They do disclose, unlike the AICC, their members. The AICC, since October 7, 2023, since the incursion in Gaza, since the genocide, have scrubbed a lot of historical stuff from their website. But we've just published an investigation into the AICC, which has been chaired for years by Australia's anti-Semitism envoy, Gillian Siegel. Our journalist, Yaakov Aharon, has pieced together the links between the weapons industry, Israel, and the creme de la creme of Australian business. The guts of it is, you can check this out on the website, the guts of it is that Israeli companies such as bomb maker Elbit Systems, the largest defence contractor in Israel, and Rafael, another one, are sponsors or have been sponsors of the AICC, and others, as well as cyber companies, the type involved in surveillance, war crimes in Gaza and elsewhere, Lebanon. So they're sponsors as well. It's very high-tech focused, as is Israel's economy. And its associate in Tel Aviv, the IACC, the Israel-Australia Chamber of Commerce, has been involved in financing illegal settlements on the West Bank. So the AICC is associated, therefore, because this is an associate in a corporate sense, with multiple breaches of international law. It's paid sponsorships make that connection. So we're talking war crimes. We're talking genocide. Let's not sugarcoat it. And this is obliquely admitted. Dave Sharma, the Liberal senator and former ambassador to Israel, at last year's summit, AICC summit, said, we quote him, "The innovation ecosystem will be supercharged by the war in Gaza. Good for profits." It's here in Gaza, in the apocalyptic rubble of Gaza, of the concentration camp, where Israel defence contractors do their human testing on Palestinians. While the effete and soft-skinned executives from Australia's business elite probably think their biggest risk lies in some share market event, a fall in the share price, heaven forbid, or perhaps they could spill red wine jus on their silk ties at an AICC luncheon at the Western Hotel. But they do actually have a legal and reputational risk. Israel is before the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. Things will come home to roost, And where this becomes problematic for the likes of, if you just pull up the page now, you can see the most recent sponsors: Macquarie Bank, PwC, ANZ, CBA, all the blue bloods, all the blue chips, and other major sponsors. If you just look at the draw card of what's coming up, the next speaker is Danielle Wood of the Productivity Commission, the chair, and then Shane Elliott, the CEO of ANZ, will host a lunch in Brisbane. Now, we've done the searches, the corporate searches into all the AIC entities, and they could be better on disclosure. But the fact is that they are associated with the financing and promotion of crimes against humanity. By association, that's what the legal term being an associate means. All of these companies, you just can Google it, they've all got ethics policies. Now, yes, ESG is scoffed at for being a bit of something that you just pay homage to and don't really care about that much. You just say the right things and never do the right things. But it is real in a legal sense. Big companies claim to pay heed to human rights in their statutory documents and international law, as well as the environment and social stuff. It's a statutory obligation because they make these claims in their documents filed with the regulators, such as their annual reports. The directors of these companies actually have a fiduciary duty, a legal duty as officers of the corporation, that if they claim adherence to international law, they should try to insist that that is true. They should try to demonstrate through their actions that is true, not just through their words. And yet here it is, in black and white, the connections to companies involved in human rights abuses and multiple breaches of international law, stealing people's land routinely. Now, something happened a few days ago which is quite momentous in a historical sense, and that was the assassination of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson by the 26-year-old, allegedly, by the 26-year-old Luigi Mangione in New York. On the face of it, this was just another murder in gunland, which is America. But the reason this incident caused such a stir worldwide is because Luigi Mangione has become something of a cult hero, despite the fact that he's a murderer, an alleged murderer, who killed an innocent man, innocent in inverted commas, because that is where the debate goes, in cold blood, on the streets outside a Manhattan hotel. Why is there so much sympathy for this guy? Well, the idea is that Thompson was being held to account. His company, United Healthcare's deliberate policy of withholding claims after people had paid them, leading to people actually dying of cancer and these types of things, a deliberate corporate policy executed by people with a fiduciary duty, in itself, you could argue, is a murderous policy. Because you know that by withholding treatment, somebody may die of disease. It's regarded, if we put it in Old Testament terms, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That's the way a lot of people have seen it, right or wrong. I'm just recording the debate. That there's been such sympathy for Mangione is telling. The reason that this is a watershed moment is not because murder is okay. It's not because now CEOs will have to pay attention to personal security and, stay tuned for the ASX float of CEO Security Limited and a booming bodyguard sector. These things may occur in the bigger companies, but it's because we've reached the point where the public square is taking corporate ethics and misbehaviour seriously. They're onto it, thanks to the changing media landscape, the internet. It's an irreversible trajectory. Now, we've been on about this for years, the public trust in large institutions, whether government or corporate, has been disintegrating. Hence the calls in political land for social media censorship, hence the measures to shut down peaceful protests over war and climate by the states. Society's been siloed into the haves who work for the institutions and the have-nots who don't, those on the outside, the insiders and the outsiders. Those on the inside cannot speak out, of course, because they are now bound by social media policies which they have to obey. They have to be on the team or risk their mortgages, their livelihood, the well-being of their families. Look what happens to whistleblowers. Now, to be fair to the people that work for the big silos, they're not personally to blame at all. They're, as human beings, no better or worse than anybody outside, no better than the other. And people are people. But this is about a system. The same system which is seeing a splintering in Australian politics of the two-party system, the two parties at their lowest primary vote for decades. It's about trust. And when, to take the live example, Danielle Wood, for instance, who I think she's fantastic, Danielle Wood, but when she gets up to speak at the AICC, she will no doubt deliver an address rich in thought and public interest. I wouldn't do it personally, but it's effectively aiding an institution which advocates for war crimes or is networked into a network of war criminals. So this is the new era, the Luigi Mangione era. And if you think about it, the rise of corporations, that is, they call them body corporates, but they're not bodies really in a human sense. Corporation, unlike a person, lives forever. Well, until it goes kaput, but it can live forever, unlike people. Unlike people who are responsible for their actions, companies have what's called limited liability. That's why you see the words LTD at the end of a corporate appellation. Their people are protected by the corporate veil to a point. But they do have directors, legal officers of the company, and this brings us back to Mangione again. And Brian Thompson, as his advocates will say, well, as an executive, his responsibility is to maximise profit to shareholders, to maximise shareholder wealth. That's his number one duty, legal duty. It is. And herein lies the rub, because eventually, if there's some great social upheaval or some event like this, then, or reputational issue, then that can hit the share price. That cannot be in the interests of shareholders. So the two do intersect. But ultimately, corporations don't have feelings, and profits may be good for individual people and good for the economy. But in the end, it's balancing the two, is it not? In the case of US healthcare, it's clearly not. That's a failed system. It's a broken system because it really only benefits the top half, not the bottom half, going back to the siloing. It benefits those inside the institutions. Pretty clear in Australia, which is always a few months behind the US, that the problems of corporations and governments are everybody's problem. We'll continue to deliver in 2025 what you will not hear in the other media. We'll continue to serve the public interest in the year ahead, and you can support us if you've got some spare change on the link provided in the description. Thanks for supporting us. Please like, share and comment in the section below.